What's going on, guys? We got Nick in the studio today with me. We're going to be talking about how to get the best value out of flipping a home.
So when you buy your first investment property or any investment property, how do you maximize the your maximum gain out of flipping a property?
So you bought this property to actually flip, right? So first you got to buy right. You can't buy the wrong property. So the adage goes, buy the worst house on the best street. That's what you want to be doing. So flipping basically means improving and adding value to it before you actually be able to sell it afterwards. And you also don't have to sell. So if you buy the wrong property, let's say you're buying the best property on the best street, like what can you do to it to actually improve it? There's nothing actually you can do with it, right? It's already a good property. It's already at its maximum possible value. So you have to buy the crappiest property in the best market, right? And the benefit of doing that is because you're going to be able to get a good price for it, right? If it's a good area, people like nice and pretty houses, and they're going to pay really good premium for it because people are acting out of their emotions. And when people are emotional, they usually pay up a lot more, right? So when you actually see a crappy house, they're going to be neglected, people don't like it, and that's when you find a good opportunity. So what you want to do is you want to be able to buy something that actually is cheap enough so that you, by adding something to it, usually it's a way of a renovation, right? It's a new kitchen or a new bathroom or better floors or better floor plan, whatever it is. By adding that on top of it, you actually want to be able to sell it at a value higher than that. So you add value by paying less, but getting a bigger value out of it. That's how you want to do it. So let's say you buy a house for 300K. Most houses in the area are selling for 500K, let's say. Pretty good bargain, right? It's probably really shit, that's why. If you can spend $100,000 to make it better, right? And therefore you're gonna spend $400,000 all up, then you're gonna be able to spend $400,000, but you're gonna be able to sell that at $500,000, making $100,000 profit. That's the basic concept of flipping. Now, when you're doing this, right, you wanna make sure that you're not what's called overcapitalizing, right? Overcapitalizing means this. Let's say houses on the streets are usually 4 stars out of 5 stars. Right, and the house that you bought was a 3-star house by quality, I'm guessing, right? And you did something to it and made it 4 stars. But you spent way too much on it. Instead of making it 4 stars, ideally you want to make it 4 stars or maybe 4.5 stars, just to make it stick out just a little bit above the market so people like to buy it. So, wow, that's really special. It's an absolute jewel of the suburb or whatever it is, right? But let's say you made it 6 stars or 7 stars. Like, you wasted all that money and there's really nobody that wants to really go after that kind of thing in the market. That's what it's called, overcapitalization, and it doesn't really work in your favor. So you make it like 7 star, but you'll only be able to sell it for a 4-star house. So you've wasted all the money that goes into the extra stars above 4 stars. Right? That's not what you want to do. That's called overcapitalizing.
How do you prevent that?
You prevent it by not being too emotional. So sometimes people, when they do flips, they make it like their own house or something. It's like, dude, like, it's not your own house. Stop being so emotional. Just do the rational parts. Just do what's required of the market, right? If the suburb is a 4-star suburb, create a 4-star house. Don't create a 5-6-star house. So that's what you want. That's what you want to make sure. There's so much to it, but when you actually buy the house, you want to make sure that you're not going to be buying something that has greater issues than what you see. So a building inspection is definitely helpful when you actually buy the house, so that there's nothing structural or anything like that, because that becomes really, really expensive. Try to stay on the cosmetic side as best as you can. I'm talking fresh lick of paint, maybe knocking down a wall so that it becomes open plan, or maybe building up a wall so that you add another bedroom. We talked about how adding a bedroom is good for rental returns, right? And also maybe it's something to do with landscaping. So those things are pretty obvious on the surface type of things that you can improve and actually be able to create better value in the property. You ideally want to stick to, like, for every $1 you spend, you want to add about $2. To the property value.
What rooms are like the best rooms to renovate to get your most bang for bucks, like a kitchen or something like that?
Sure. Depending on the area that you're in, right? So if you're in a really nice upper class suburb, then like a kitchen renovation to, a regular flat pack isn't really going to cut it. You got to spend quite a lot of money. The most expensive room in the house is bathroom. Second is your kitchen. Because, things to do, plumbing and gas, what have you, tiling, all these things are really expensive. So what you want to do is you want to make sure, again, that you don't overcapitalize in these bathrooms. You can see, it doesn't take a really intelligent person to identify, this is too much. I'm not gonna freaking lay these walls out with with golden trims, right? You're not gonna do that in a regular suburb where a 3-bedroom house is maybe $600,000.
Yeah. After you're done flipping the property, do you have to sell it?
Okay, so usually the flip idea thinks people think that you have to sell the property, but the answer is no, you don't. So let's say you bought a house for $100,000, you spent $10,000 on it, and it became $120,000, right? Then what you can do is this: you can do what's called cash out refinance. Right, so you borrow how much of a house?
100,000.
You borrow how much of the house?
Like 20%.
Borrowed how much of a?
What do you mean?
Okay, you put down 20, you borrow 80, right?
Yeah.
So you borrowed how much of the house?
I'm not good at math, man. 25%? Is that what you mean?
You buy a house for 100,000. How much do you borrow? How much do you pay?
I don't know. You borrowed. What do you mean?
If he can understand property, you definitely can. If when you buy a house for 100K,
Yeah.
what's your deposit and how much do you borrow?
Your deposit's like 20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much do you borrow?
And you borrow 80,000.
Yeah, great. High-powered mathematics.
I didn't know deposit was deposit always 20%?
We're gonna assume that it is.
Okay.
For most cases, it is 20%. Right? So you're gonna put down 20%. You put down 20% and you borrowed 80%, right? So it means you borrowed 80 grand on the property. The property is now worth 120 grand. Okay, what's the new 80% of the 120 grand?
Dude, you can't give me math questions, bro. You can't give me math questions.
It's 96 grand.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 96 grand. Okay, it's 96 grand. Of course I was right. Okay, so 80% of the 120 grand, which is the new value of the house, is $96,000, right? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna get a new loan on the value of the new house. The banks are always willing to give you 80% of the house. So they will then give you 80% of 120 grand, which is $96,000, right? Which is gonna pay your previous loan of how much?
80 grand.
80 grand. So how much are you left with now?
16 grand.
Exactly right. And you can use that 16 grand to do what? Go buy another house for 100K. You just add another 4 grand onto it. You bought another one. See? So you don't actually have to sell it. That does, however, increase your what? Repayments by that much, right? So you borrowed 80K before, but now you're borrowing 96K. So 2% of 80K was $1,600 a year in repayments, right? But 2% of 96K is exactly $1,920. So the new repayment is going to be $1,920 versus $1,600 previously. So you're only paying $320 more per year than before. Now, because you made the property better by adding that $10,000, you should be able to get a higher what?
Return?
Rent.
Rent.
Correct. So that rent will then subsidize that rental as well. And often you are, again, better off in the cash flow as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of what I actually did. I bought a house for $166,000. Let's call it $170,000 for the ease of calculation, right? Pretty easy to do. I spent 11 grand on that house, 11 grand, and it's now worth $250,000. Sound pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah, these things happen. And my rent has increased from about $260 a week to about $350 a week, right? You just multiply that out and it makes sense in every freaking regard. I can then do cash out refinance of that, pay it all out and use that money to then go buy another house. So at $170,000, I borrowed about $130,000, right? At $250,000, then I can borrow up to $200,000, couldn't I?
Yeah.
Then I do cash out refinance and I get 30 grand out of it. And with that 30 grand, I can then go buy another $150,000 house at a 20% deposit.
So it's possible when you're flipping properties. Is this how people get started where like they just snowball it?
Yeah, they
and then
snowball it.
just keep going and buy more and more and more?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it happens.
Is it better to buy a flip property like in a high rental area or something like that? Like you said before?
Yeah, high rental is going to be helpful. Rental is always going to be helpful because it's good money, right? So you probably want to, clock in as high of a rental as possible. Now, that's not always necessary. Some people take bigger risks in a better area where there's like a really, really crappy house. So think about it. I think if you got into a crazier market where like houses normally sell for 800, 900K per house, let's say, right? And then there was a house there that was really terrible, crappy, that sold for, let's say, 750K. Spending another 30K, 40K could actually get you to the 850, 900K, which is a much, much bigger gain, right? But you got to have a bigger amount of money to actually throw it down into the renovations itself.
Yeah. How do you know how to budget for flipping houses?
Experience. But something good to do is to work with recommendations with tradies, so that you get an idea of how much things cost. With painting, get an idea of how much painting costs, to repaint a 3-bedroom house. Flooring, you can also reduce your material acquisition price and things like that. Try to build a relationship with any handyman or project managers out there so that you reduce the cost as best as you can. So you can buy materials from like auction websites where they're liquidating, building companies and stuff like that. And you can buy them for a lot cheaper than the market rate. And you want to stick to the neutral colors as well. So you're not putting like red colored tiles that nobody's gonna like. Maybe one person's gonna like. So try to stick to the neutrals, the whites and the creams. There's also like even kitchen parts and stuff like that. You can buy off-season stock for a lot cheaper than what's available out on retail. So usually that's a quick trip down to a warehouse that has them as well. And the stocks are quite limited, but as long as you're not so emotional, you can just buy the right parts and you're done with it as well. And there are also outlets for kitchen appliances and white goods as well, which is definitely helpful too. Yeah.
How do you know like what to outsource and what you can do yourself.
If you can do as much of it as possible, then that's a really good thing, because A, you learn how to do it. B, you can stuff up, but you learn by doing it, right? And if you do stuff up and you realize you're bad at it, that's when you realize this isn't for me. So anything you can do and you do well, go for it. I've seen people who do it at the beginning and they do a really good job, and that's part of their equity building. But it's kind of like having another job after work, which can be very, very strenuous for a lot of people who have full-time jobs. So I don't really recommend it. But also, time is of the essence, because if you think about it, you're paying all these repayments while you own the property, right? So, if somebody can do it quicker, right, then find somebody else to do it, rather than you, I'm in an RN, wondering when you would rock up to the property, do it, what day of the week is good for your work schedule, so that you can come around and do it. Like, don't do that, and just get straight to the point. Thank you so much for tuning into today's topic of flipping houses. I'm sure you have more questions about all of this. Make sure you leave them in the comments section down below. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure you go like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.